The Wolf mansion was silent except the nursery. A 7-week-old girl, Isla, cried with a fierce, breathless rhythm that rattled the cedar halls. Outside, Lake Washington glittered. Inside, billionaire Adrian Wolf stood powerless while expertise ran thin. The head nanny paced. The pediatrician fumbled for theories. In the doorway, someone who shouldn't be there paused. Mira Alvarez, sleeves rolled, laundry forgotten, feeling that cry in her bones like an echo from another life. "May I try?" she asked. Protocol bristled. Adrian lifted a hand. "Let her." Mira crossed the threshold, a quiet presence meeting a storm, and for the first time all day, the room began to breathe. Subscribe to Golden Tales for more heartfelt stories. Like, comment, and turn on notifications. The cries were a jagged metronome, short, sharp, relentless. SRA Pembroke paced in crisp circles, issuing instructions that dissolved in the air. Dr. Neil Parker checked the infant's reflexes again, proposed reflux, gas, overstimulation, then trailed off, hearing the thinness of his own certainty. Adrian Wolf stood anchored beside the crib, jaw set, eyes hollow. Isla's tiny chest heaved. Her fists flashed like small, furious comets. Mira Alvarez hovered in the doorway, palms damp, heart in her throat. She wasn't supposed to be here. Laundry didn't lead to nurseries, not in houses like this. But the sound pulled at something older than rules. She stepped once into the light. "May I try?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "Absolutely not," SRA Pembroke snapped, pivoting. "This is a medical." Adrian lifted his hand without looking away from his daughter. "Let her." A beat of silence. Then space opened, reluctant but real. Mira moved with a deliberate slowness, narrating so no one startled the child. "Lights down a notch, please. Fewer eyes." She nodded to the curtains. Someone drew them. She slid a clean receiving blanket over her shoulder, rubbed its edge between her fingers to warm it, then lifted Isla with a steadiness that came from 100 midnights in a cramped apartment years ago. "Hi, Pequeña," she whispered, resting the baby against her collarbone, cheek to downy hair. She matched Isla's frantic breaths. Fast in, fast out, then gradually lengthened her own. Inhale 4, exhale 4. Inhale 5, exhale 5. Her palm cupped the back of the tiny head. Her other hand anchored the diapered hips. A low hum, half lullaby, half heartbeat, spooled into the room. The pitch of the crying changed first, not volume but meaning. The jagged metronome softened, hiccuped, listened. Mira waded through the next crest, breathed through it, hummed again. "Too many hands, too many smells," she murmured to no one and to everyone. "She needs one rhythm." Isla's fists unfurled. A shudder became a sigh. The cry collapsed into small, searching sounds and then into quiet, the fragile, astonished kind that feels like a truce. Adrian exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for days. SRA Pembroke's posture held, but her eyes flickered. In the hush, something decisive clicked into place. A billionaire deferred to a housemaid, because his daughter had just chosen whose heartbeat she believed. The quiet held like thin glass. No one wanted to be the first sound to break it. Mira kept humming, cheek against Isla's crown. The baby's breathing now a small tide against her collarbone. SRA Pembroke rearranged bottles that were already aligned, a ritual for authority she no longer possessed. Dr. Neil Parker studied his shoes as if the answer were stitched in the leather. Adrian stepped closer, careful, as though he were approaching both his daughter and a secret. "What did you change?" he asked, voice low. "Not her," Mira said, still swaying. "The room." She tilted her head toward the dimmed lights, the drawn curtains, the bodies that had taken a half step back. Fewer signals. One rhythm. SRA Pembroke recovered her command. "She's sleeping. We'll take it from here." Her hand lifted, palm out. Adrian didn't retreat. "No," he said, the single syllable landing with the weight of a signed order. Not yet. The head nanny blinked. Mr. Wolf. She stays, he said without raising his voice. Then, to Mira, softer. If you're willing. Mira met his eyes only briefly, then looked back to Isla, as if confirming with the person who mattered most. I'll stay until she's in deep sleep, she said. And after, if you want, I can show you what I did. The invitation shifted the gravity of the room. Adrian nodded. Show me. They moved as a small constellation. Mira and Isla by the crib's edge, Adrian at her shoulder. Match her, Mira murmured. Feel, then lead. She guided his hand, hesitation, then contact. So his palm supported the tiny back, his thumb resting where he could sense each inhale. Adrian synced his breathing to his daughter's, discovering the tether between his lungs and hers. Sarai Pembroke opened her mouth and closed it again. Dr. Parker cleared his throat and found nothing to add. When Isla's body went heavy in that particular way of deep infant sleep, Mira laid her down with a practiced tilt, one hand lingering to shield the startle reflex. The baby sighed, settled. Adrian didn't look away. Stay on for the rest of the day, he said. And tomorrow. A beat. Teach me. Teach us. There it was, the turn. Not a flourish, not a speech. A father choosing a path he hadn't planned, committing to presence over protocol because his daughter had answered first. The house exhaled. Afternoon thinned into a pale gold that slid across the kitchen's glass and pine. Mira rinsed bottles at the sink, sleeves rolled, movements unhurried. Adrian lingered in the doorway a moment longer than politeness required, listening to the small household sounds that had replaced sirens in his head. Thank you, he said finally. Mira turned, half-smile, a little shy. She did the work. I only made space. He stepped in, not the CEO stride, something smaller. How did you know what space to make? My abuela, Mira said, drying her hands. In August heat, my brother would cry like that. Like the world was too loud. She'd hum, slow the room. She said babies don't borrow our words. They borrow our nervous systems. Adrian's mouth tilted, a private admission. I've given this house everything except my nervous system. Mira glanced past him toward the hall, where the nursery lay quiet. She can tell when you're here. You don't have to be perfect. Just consistent. One rhythm she can trust. He nodded, absorbing it as if it were a quarterly metric. Show me what that looks like when it's not a crisis. They sat with Isla later in the garden room, light softened by ferns. Mira placed the baby against Adrian's chest, guiding his hand to the tiny back. Match, then lead. He breathed with her, felt the fragile compass of another life point toward him. Sarai Pembroke passed once, twice, supervision held behind tight lips. Dr. Parker sent a message about follow-up, then didn't ring the bell. By dusk, the house's frequency had dropped a full octave. Isla slept in small, steady waves. Adrian watched the rise and fall against his shirt and realized the strangest thing. Silence wasn't the absence of work. It was the result of it. And for the first time in weeks, he believed he could do it again tomorrow. 2 days later, the elevator opened to glass and sky. Wolf Nexus Health's training floor spread in quiet, sunlit angles. White boards, soft chairs. A nursery mock-up behind a pane of soundproof glass. Adrian walked beside Mira, not leading so much as accompanying. We're building tools for parents, he said. But we're missing the thing that calmed my daughter. You. Myra's gaze lingered on the mock crib. I'm not a clinician. I'm not asking for letters, Adrian replied. I'm asking for what you already do. Teach us to listen before we measure. He gestured to the room. A program. Workshops. Field visits. Start here, then the community. Silence held. Then Mira. On one condition. She didn't waver. I stay close to Isla. I won't trade presence for theory. Adrian's answer came without hesitation. You won't have to. He extended a badge. Not charity. Not a favor. A role with a name, Human Connection Initiative Lead Trainer. The purpose she hadn't known she was waiting for. The pilot workshop drew a full room. Engineers, designers, consultants, and 2 board observers in suits that rustled like judgment. Cameras were set to record for internal learning. Mira scanned the lighting, too bright. The HVAC hummed at a nervous tempo. She asked to dim the room. The AV tech nodded, then fumbled. The lights stayed clinical. Adrian arrived with Isla, hoping the familiar scent of his shirt would anchor her. First, it worked. Then a microphone popped, a sharp crack. Isla startled, her face scrunching, lungs loading. The cry came high, jagged, spiraling. Heads turned. Someone whispered, "This is why we use devices." Another, "Anecdote doesn't scale." Mira lifted her hand, signaling stillness. "We match, then lead," she said, voice even. But the room wouldn't give her quiet. A board observer cleared his throat into a hot mic. A designer asked a process question mid-swell. The AV tech apologized aloud. Noise stacked on noise. Isla's cry climbed. SRA Pembroke, watching from the back, folded her arms. Dr. Parker murmured, "Perhaps we should pivot to validated protocols." Adrian looked split in two, father and CEO, caught between pulling the plug and protecting Myra's approach. He tried to breathe with Isla, but the room kept intruding. Mira felt heat crawl her neck. The method that depended on presence had nowhere to land. She could see it unraveling in real time, the narrative shifting. From quiet miracle to reckless gamble. After 15 strained minutes, Adrian made the only call he could inside that noise. "We'll reconvene," he said, voice tight. People filed out, trading glances. Before the elevator doors closed, a Slack headline pinged in pockets. Human Connection Initiative. All heart, no results? In the emptied room, the recording light blinked red, documenting the failure. Mira held Isla in a quieter corner and finally found the rhythm. Too late for the room that had already decided. The next morning, the board wanted a postmortem. PR drafted a holding line about iterating. Adrian closed the document and stared at his reflection in the glass. CEO face, father's eyes. Last night's recording sat in his inbox like a verdict. He pressed play, listened to the noise stack on noise, then scrubbed to the very end. A sliver the room had missed. In the corner, off mic, Isla's cry softened the instant the chaos thinned. Presence had worked, just not under a spotlight built for quarterly proofs. He stood, decision settling in his bones the way a signature settles on a page. He called facilities. "We're moving the next session." He called legal. "We'll accept the risk." He called communications. "We're inviting parents from the community." Finally, he texted Mira, "Capitol Hill Clinic. For PM. I'll be there. With Isla. We do it our way." At the internal debrief, a director recommended pausing the program. Adrian didn't raise his voice. "No. We designed for optics, not outcomes. We fixed the environment, not the idea." He met each gaze unblinking. "If this fails in the right conditions, we end it. But we will give it the right conditions." He picked up Isla's carrier himself. The elevator doors opened. This time, he chose presence over protocol, and he chose it in public. The community clinic in Capitol Hill smelled of eucalyptus and laundry soap, not glass and policy. The multipurpose room held a circle of chairs, a rug, a basket of soft blankets. No stage, no microphones, just parents with tired eyes and babies in cotton onesies. Adrian arrived with Isla and sat in the circle like everyone else. No entourage, no suits. Mira stood, palms open. No slides, just breath. "We're going to build quiet together." She nodded to the HVAC. A nurse lowered the fan to a hush. Phones went face down in a basket by the door. The room exhaled. "Step 1, Mira said, voice low. "Match." She lifted Isla, settling the baby against her chest. Fast in, fast out. Exactly as she's doing. A handful of parents copied, awkward at first. Step 2. Soften the room. Lights down, voices off. Choose one anchor, touch or hum, not both. She hummed that threadbare lullaby. A father across the circle placed 2 fingers gently at the base of his baby's skull, palm at the diapered hips, as she taught. Step 3. Lead slowly. Mira lengthened her exhale by 1 count. Isla's cry hitched, then recalibrated to the new tempo, like a small boat finding the right current. The father mirrored, counting under his breath. His daughter blinked, fists loosening. A mother beside him began to weep silently, not from fear, relief. At the back, an engineer from the failed pilot watched, arms folded. He unfolded them when, one by one, babies' cries modulated. First in patches, then across the circle like dominoes tipping toward quiet. No pop, no applause line, just proof, stubborn and visible. Notice the moment you're tempted to fix, Mira said, scanning the room. Instead, notice the breath you can offer. Adrian lifted his eyes to meet hers as Isla melted heavy against his shirt. He breathed with her, then led by a single count. She surrendered to sleep. The clinic held still, a shared cathedral of tiny, syncopated sighs. The engineer cleared his throat. "We need to design for this," he said, not to argue but to concede. Adrian didn't speak. He didn't need to. The room had already chosen. Within a week, the clip from the clinic, no logos, no polish, just a circle of parents and softer air, circulated inside Wolf Nexus Health. The engineer who'd crossed his arms at the back drafted a memo titled Designing for Quiet. Reduce audio artifacts, dim to circadian-friendly light, eliminate non-essential alerts. Dr. Neil Parker adapted clinical checklists to include presence prerequisites before any intervention. Lower noise, 1 caregiver, rhythm match. Even SRA Pembroke rewrote nursery protocols. Fewer hands, clearer handoffs, 1 lead voice, with the reluctant grace of someone who had seen results. Myra's program took a name and a cadence. First, the heart. Morning workshops for staff, afternoon circles at the Capitol Hill Clinic, evening drop-ins for new parents who only needed a chair and a minute to breathe. Instead of dashboards, the team built environments. Sound-treated corners, textured blankets that warmed quickly, wearables that reported to caregivers, not to perform but to reassure. The point was never to replace touch. The point was to make it easier to offer. At home, the mansion changed register. The nursery no longer sounded like a mission control. It sounded like tide. Adrian's meetings shifted by 15 minutes. An agenda item called breath check appeared on his calendar, private and unshareable. Some afternoons, he worked from the garden room with Isla asleep on his chest. Emails answered to the rhythm of a 7-week-old sighs. On a clear evening, the rooftop held a small celebration. No speeches. A handful of staff, the clinic nurse, the once skeptical engineer, Dr. Parker with his revised checklist, SRA Pembroke with a gentler posture, Mira with Isla snug against her shoulder. Adrian lifted a glass. Water, not for show, and simply said, "Thank you for helping me learn how to listen." Mira glanced at Isla, then back at him. "She taught us all." The sky over Lake Washington went indigo. The city hummed below. On the roof, it was quiet by design. If this story warmed your heart, subscribe to Golden Tales, hit like, leave a comment, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Which moment moved you most, the clinic circle or the first hush in the nursery? Tell us in the comments. And if you've ever been changed by a small act of noticing, share your story. Someone out there needs your light.